Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, we have the privilege of hearing another amazing It's the Bread story. And I say we because I haven't yet heard the whole story, but I'll be hearing it right along with you for the very first time. My guest today is Dawn Perdomo. And it was actually Dawn's friend, Betsy Merritt, who emailed me about Dawn. So before I introduce Dawn, I want to read to you Betsy's email to me because I believe that her words will get you as excited as I am about hearing Dawn's story. So here's the words of Betsy as she writes to me. I am writing on behalf of a friend. My best friend, Dawn Perdomo, and I have ordered from Bread Beckers for years, but in the last year, she has begun listening to your podcast. I want to thank you. In it, she has found the answers to a lifelong physical problem, and I am writing as a witness to this. I have prayed much for God to heal her and provide answers, and it has been so beautiful to watch that healing occur. Dawn is shouting it from the rooftops, and can I tell you, it is effective. She has become a pastor's wife in the last 3 years when her husband stepped into a pastoring role. Recently, our fellowship held a week-long event, and she took 1 hour to promote Whole Wheat Bread, the Bread of Life, from your book. Our fellowship is small, running from 80 to 120 attending each week, but a surprisingly large number had dietary restrictions related to grains. Many were gluten-free, grain-free, yeast-free, and a variety of other regulations. After her talk, 8 families bought meals and grain, and they asked for bread baking tips weekly. Praise the Lord. We are already seeing results of health. Last week, we had a cookie contest at our church, and wouldn't you know, the top placers were made with freshly milled whole wheat. If you ever need a guest for your podcast, I know Dawn would be eager to thank you and sing the praises of walking in God's ways. So I think you can see why I got excited about hearing just the testimony of Dawn's story. From reading Betsy's email, I wanted to hear more. So I reached out to Dawn immediately, and I am so happy to have Dawn join me today on Sue's Healthy Minutes. Dawn, thank you for being willing to take time out of your busy schedule to join me today. And I know that you're a busy wife and a mother with 7 children from the picture you sent me of your beautiful family. So, Dawn, welcome. I just can't tell you how excited I am. So why don't you begin by sharing with our listeners a little bit about yourself, your family, and where you're from?
Yes, so I'm a mom of 7. My children age from ages 3 to 21. My husband is an engineer, and we live just north of Tampa. And we have a dairy goat farm. We started goats about 15 years ago, and that kind of goes into our bread story as well. And we went and got some property and bought it, and we built our own house. He designed it, and we built it, and we lived in the camper and then the tiny house, and now we live in our house. 2 of our children are off at college. One is in Virginia, and the other is about an hour away.
So you are certainly a busy mom with a goat and dairy farm and 7 children and homeschooling and a husband. That is exciting. But all right. So I know the suspense is mounting. We've got to hear about your story. Betsy stated that you had both been Bread Beckers customers for years, but after listening to Sue's Healthy Minutes, you found the answer to a lifelong physical problem. So first, start by telling us how you found Bread Beckers and how long you've been making bread, but then share with us about what you learned on Sue's Healthy Minutes and what your experience has been like.
Yeah, so we do the Sabbath on Saturdays, and we had been going to a Bible study, and somebody gave us the CD. That was in 2010, probably. And so we came home, and I listened to it, and I was like, oh man, honey, you got to hear this. So I gave it to him, and he would drive an hour into Tampa for work, and he came home, and we had 3 little ones, money was tight, things were there, and he said, we're going to buy the mill. And I was like, we are. And he said, but we're going to get the hand mill because I don't want something that's going to break and then we'll have to replace it. So we got the Country Living grain mill that has the crank, and you do it. Well, actually, the first day, his dad had like a 1-cup miller. So my husband is an engineer. He researches everything. It takes months before you buy something because he looks at everything, that's just how he is. So we had like a little 1-cup grinder that his dad had. And so I just started with that. I thought, I'm going to do this. I need to do this for my family. And I think when he saw that I would take this little thing, and grind, he's like, okay, so we're going to get the big one. And he said, but we're not going to get one of these. You hit the button. If it breaks, I want something that's not going to be able to break, that's going to do it. And so for 2 years, I did the hand mill. I would mill it with the big handle there. And
wow, and dedication.
Yeah, and about a year into that, I got pregnant. So I'm not a good baker. I'm not, and it's not like nowadays where you can kind of pull up YouTube, you can pull up this. I would ask. Oh yeah, yeah. I would ask my neighbor, it's just really dense. And she'd say, well, don't add more flour, add more, just add oil to it. And she would kind of give me advice. But I had like $100 mixer that I had got at Target as a wedding gift, and that's what I was using. And so really we would do kind of the muffins and we would do the waffles, but I ground it pretty coarse and it didn't taste the best, but I would eat it. I've always had stomach problems, like just more like after I eat, upset stomach. I've always been really skinny. Didn't really think about it. But in those years before we got the bread mill, we started switching with the church we went to, the associate pastor and his wife. We would switch off. I would babysit her 2 kids and so they could have a date night, and then she would watch my kids so we could have a date night. And those turned out to be awful because that was the first time we had been able to go out to dinner on our own, and I would get sick every time when we got home. And so I would try to just eat a salad, try to eat French onion soup, and that would still make me sick. And I couldn't quite figure out. So we just kind of avoided going out to eat. And but we did the bread, but I didn't make it real consistent. I wasn't good at bread, so I would do kind of muffins and waffles. And, you have kids and I was pregnant, so it was kind of sporadic. It wasn't consistent where you would maybe, I'm sure that's why I didn't get as sick as I did later on. So we ended up having the baby, and I have to tell you, he was, he's this tiny little 2-month-old baby, and I'm holding him, and we do the mill, and his head would stop. He knew that sound of that grinding. He would stop and lift his head up, and it was just, I just remember his little fuzzy head, listening to the, but he was a great delivery, but I kind of had some complications in recovering. And so Gabe would say, well, I'm like, I can't mill. It's too physically, I'm crying. And he said, well, I'll just mill it to you before I go to work. You tell me when you're going to need it. Well, I had, 4 children and I wasn't I'm not a planner anyway. And so I just cry. And he said, so he bought me the motor that attached to the grinder. So now I would be able to hit a button and the motor would attach and do the Country Living grain mill, and we had grain. But about this time we had God was moving us to this property we had actually gone on a couple of mission trips over the years, and the last one we went to, we considered going back to Costa Rica to do some mission work. They have Engineering Ministries International there. Gabe was looking at that and stuff, and we just realized like we have too much. We owe on this house. We can't. So we made a decision to get out of debt, and part of that was to get some land and build our own house. And so that's what we did. That's a whole long journey, but we bought land and we moved into a camper. So in this tiny camper with 4 children, I had a mill that took up half the table, And oh my gosh. And people would say, "What are you doing?" I said, "No, I need this. This is really good for our family, But But there were seasons, there were seasons where that meal was stacked with bread loaves from the store, there were seasons. And if you've ever been in a camper, you have the tiny little oven, and so it was really hard to cook in that and measure. So I would do some muffins and things, but still not real consistent and things. So we were in the camper for 2.5 years, and then we got a tiny house. We got a shed and converted it to a tiny house, and I had a real oven and a place for my meal to sit. And so I got a little more better about making the breads and breaking things. We had our fifth daughter, Hannah, in the camper. And at this time, my husband was traveling for work all the time, back and forth. He would come back Friday nights and leave Sunday morning. And he was working in Jamaica and in different places. And so we just kind of did life. And once we got into the tiny house, Jediah was born. He's number 6. But things had progressively gotten, like my stomach issues. Whenever we would go out to eat, I would get really sick. And it started changing to, it wasn't just when we would go out to eat, it was starting to be when I would eat at home. And so I would say we probably had, muffins 2 or 3 times a week. It wasn't something that, or banana bread or something. It wasn't like consistent bread, Yeah. And so, it never occurred to me, that might be the answer. I went everywhere for answers. That was my normal, and I think people just accept that as their normal. And that's what I wanted to, that's why I'm so passionate. Like, this isn't normal. This is, God has an answer, and I can share it with you and show you how, because everything in our society revolves around food. Everybody always wants to go out to dinner. Let's go celebrate the birthday. Let's get ice cream afterwards. And if you have dietary things and you're getting upset something, then you're sitting there like, I know this is going to upset my stomach, or I don't want to eat. Or his parents, I'd order the food and I didn't eat it. And they're like, well, why aren't you eating? They're paying for this beautiful meal. And I'm just moving it around on my plate. So it looks like I ate it, but I'm not really fooling anybody, but I know I'm going to get sick if I eat this. And so actually, it was right before Jediah was born. I was getting really, really sick. And so I told Gabe, and I would go to the doctor and they would do testing, your blood. Let's test your thyroid. Let's test this. Let's do your gallbladder. And I would have this hope, like, okay, this is going to be the answer, and everybody has an answer. I'm skinny, and people would say, oh, you're so lucky. You're so skinny. And I'm like, well, if you threw up your dinner, you'd be skinny too, like it is not good, and they say, well, you just need to eat bananas all the time. Well, try pancreatic enzymes. Like, there's always just a fake hope, like you would wait on that test result and it's normal, and you would wait on this and it's normal. And I'm like, so with Jediah, and I'm homeschooling my kids. I have 2 kids in high school at this point, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. My kids, like, the nights I would be sick, I would wake up very tired. I'd be laying in the bed. They would get up and milk the goats and do the chores and help. And, they learned compassion. They learned service. They learned how to do things. I'm thankful for what we went through. It made them who they are, which are very compassionate, loving children that know how to cook, know how to make lunch and things. But, and I would get better when I was pregnant. So when I was pregnant with Nehemiah, I was really good. When I was pregnant with Hannah, I felt a lot better, but that is not a solution, So before I got pregnant with Jediah, I was really sick. And I just told Gabe, his parents are both doctors. They, had come over from Cuba and, Venezuela, and had worked their way, from community college to medical school. And so they were both doctors. And I told his mom, I said, I want every test. Something is not right. Something is not right. I want every test you can do. I want to know, like, something is not right. And so she did all these tests, and they did stool samples, and they found fat in the stool, which was malabsorption, and said malabsorption syndrome. And I thought, okay, well, this is the answer. I'll just cut out fat. So I cut out fat. And that really helped. I wouldn't get as sick or anything, but, and then I got pregnant after that. And so we were good with the pregnancy, and I was limited on the fat. I could always eat better when I was pregnant. And so, once that went in and Jediah was born, when my kids were about 7, 8 months, that's kind of when my symptoms would come back. And so the symptoms started coming back, and I was avoiding fat, but you can't live eating salads. Like, my weight was 98 pounds, and it would drop to 94 pounds, and it just wasn't healthy. I could not maintain weight on salad, on fruit, on nuts. They're like, eat little meals. It just didn't work, and
It's not sustainable.
Yes. So we were in the tiny house and I was making the bread. So we were just about to move into the house when your podcast came out. It was probably like 2 years ago. So in 2020, our oldest daughter went to college at Patrick Henry and she was our primary milker. So I took the job back over of milking. And so I would put on your podcast. It was a perfect 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and I could listen to it. And I thought, maybe this is the answer, like maybe I'm just not doing enough, and so I started milling and making the muffins, banana bread. I still had not conquered bread, but I would try it and we would do it. I'd mostly do like Ezekiel bread or things that could do. And then my husband came home one day with the big mixer, and that helped a lot. But I was also really busy and I thought, I need a bread maker. And I was trying to like kind of find one that wasn't, over $400. And Gabe picked up my phone and he said, "What are you Googling? $400 for a bread maker? You have a bread maker." And I was like, "Well, that's not a bread maker. that doesn't work." And I'm a firm believer. I mean, we call our farm Field of Faithfulness because God has showed himself faithful on every step of what we've done. And he gives you the desires of your heart. And I was like, "Lord, I want a bread maker. And I know you will get me a bread maker." And sure enough, about 2 weeks later, Facebook Marketplace popped up $50 for the, I don't even know how to say her.
Wow. That's the God thing, because they're not $50.
Yes. And so I was like, can I come in the morning? And so I ended up going over to her house and getting the bread maker. And it changed was that I made it every day and I made a commitment. The more I listened to your podcast and understood what each ingredient did, what everything did, that it would heal me. I knew it would heal me, and over the years I had prayed like, "God, why won't you heal me? I know you can heal me. I know there's something." And my verse has always been, "Wait on the Lord and he will renew your strength." And that Hebrew word wait is kavah, and it's like a cord that goes together and it gets so tightly wound that you can't see the beginning of one or the end of the other. And that is what relying on the Lord through those years of sickness and trying to mother and trying to run the farm and having my husband out of town, like it built my faith, and I knew he was going to heal me. He gave me a verse, which my husband laughed at me because it said, "You will grow like the fattened calf," or it's in Isaiah. I can't remember exactly. And my husband's like, "The fattened calf gets slaughtered."
No, we're not getting slaughtered, but you're going to grow like the fattened calf. That's great.
I said, I am going to do this. And so we started doing the bread more and more and seeing the results. That we went to Ford's Garage and I ordered a brisket burger. I don't know if you've ever seen a brisket burger, but it is the burger and it's got brisket on top of it and I ate the entire thing. And you kind of have that panic afterward, like, I am going to get so sick. What did I just do? And I didn't, and I didn't. And it was kind of changing my mindset of, you don't have to be fearful. He's healing you. It's okay. You're moving forward. But I started having some issues at night. I would go to bed and about 4 hours later, I'd wake up just shaking really bad. And it was really scary. And so we started going back to the doctors and I'm like, no answers. They're like, "Oh, well, you're pre-diabetic." And I thought, surely I'm not pre-diabetic, I probably listened to your diabetes podcast 3 times. And I was like, okay, because I would do, I had the mindset that you do what you can do, and that is good. That is great. But I wasn't getting the full benefit because I hadn't, like, if I was going to make a dessert, I would grab the all-purpose flour. If I was going to make, something, I would do that. And I thought, this is the problem. Like, you can't, and they told me, the guy said, well, the doctor said, there's no answer. You can be on medicine or you can do it, but you're never going to be able to do it. And I told Gabe, I said, I want to go enjoy, I want to know my limits. And he said, why would you want to know your limit? I said, I want to know if I can eat an ice cream cone. You miss out when everybody's at the birthday party and you don't get the piece of cake or you don't. And it's not like I want the cake, but I want to celebrate. I want to join in,
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm not doing that. Sue, this diabetic thing, this is not right. Sue, I would listen to it and I'd say, you need the fiber to digest these. So I said, that's it. No more flour. My little girls love to bake, and so does my son. And, that's kind of the easy way to get them, and I just threw it all away. I saved one little half a bag that they could make Play-Doh with. I'm like, you're not using my fresh milled flour to make
That's
Play-Doh.
what I tell people. If you have white flour in your house, make Play-Doh. Let the kids make Play-Doh.
Yes. And I just made the decision, like, this is what we're doing, and there's no reason we won't do it. If we have to adjust our schedule, if we have to make things work. And so I made the challah. We blessed the bread at the Sabbath service, and we have 2 challah loaves, and I would make those every week. And the ones I had made before called for, 4.5 cups of bread flour. So they were these big, beautiful loaves, but they were, there's no value in them. There's nothing really there. It's not bread.
Right.
And so I switched it to the other, and some of the ladies that had dietary needs, I would say, you can eat this bread. This is fresh milled. You should be able to eat this. And they would eat it, and they wouldn't have a problem. And so I started making the challah every week to bring to service. And we had a lot that are gluten-free. And I had heard Sarah Valentine,
yes,
who was on your program. And I said, you have to listen to this. I said, I believe, like, God wants you to have life, and he wants you to have life abundantly, and he can heal you. And you just look around, and there's so many struggling with dietary and gluten and yeast. And, we do a big, we call it an oneg. It's a big potluck after meals, and you have to label everything and be careful when you go through. And I thought, you don't have to do this. You don't have to live this way. God has provided bread, real bread that will heal you. And so, they started like eating my bread, but I always go back to on your testimony, when you say I'm not to make bread for the world. I am to teach people to make bread, because I have a household. I have a farm. I have 2 girls at college that call me at 12:30 at night to talk for an hour,
Yeah. Yeah.
That is my ministry. And as much as I want you healed, I can teach you to fish, but I cannot fish for you. I can give you all these resources. And so when we were having the Feast of Tabernacles, where we had meet for 8 days and go camping, and there's different classes. So there was like a tea making class, a micro gains, and they asked me to do the challah class. And I had done that last year and mentioned the bread, but just kind of showed how to roll. I'm more focused on how to roll out challah and stuff. And I just felt the Lord telling me, like, you will not do that this year. You are going to teach on real bread. You are going to spend most of the time talking about bread and the bread of life, and how Yeshua can't, like, just tie it all together. And so I did that, and I shared my testimony, and I shared most of the parts of your book, and how there is this, if you look in the world today, there is an attack on Jesus and the Word of God like never before. And there is also an attack on bread like there has never been before.
Yes.
And the answer is not to get rid of it.
Right.
The answer is to get the authentic, real life, and so I taught the class, and I'd say when I lived in the camper in the tiny house, God taught me what I needed, right? I had the tiny little oven, I had one spatula, I had, but when I went into the house, he gave me what I wanted. So now I have a double oven that I can. So I took all those challah loaves, and everybody had made their own, and we laid it. And people that had not eaten bread, one woman had not eaten bread for 9 years, and she was able to eat it. Others that hadn't had gluten, like, it just, and you see, like, it's only been, that was in October, like, 12th. So what are we, like, I mean, it's only been a month, and they are all, I get a text almost every day about how it's changed their lives, how they're eating, how they're healing, how, blood pressure and diabetes. I mean, you just, and one woman asked me, she said, what about psoriasis? And I said, well, I can't Google it and tell you yes, but the answer is yes.
Oh, I can tell you so many testimonies about psoriasis going away in a matter of a couple of months. And I'm talking severe cases just going away. Yeah.
Yes. So it has been such a journey, and to be able to share that, and to give people their lives back, to give people their, when I called my friend Kayla, and she was the one that organized the whole Feast of Tabernacles, and I was like, guess who called me? She literally just started crying, and she said, Dawn, you have changed my life. Like, God has used you to change my life and give me my life back.
Yeah. And that's the thing the Lord's really hitting me with in the last few months, because I prayed for a young lady at a conference where I spoke, and she said, I've just been praying for food freedom, and we're in such bondage, to food fear. And it really saddens me. It really saddens me. So I hear your passion, and you can share your testimony, and people can't argue with your testimony, whether it's about Jesus Christ and the life he's changed, the life he's given you, or eating and the life he's given us through the food that he provided for us.
Yeah. So. And he is always going to provide a way, right? People like, oh, the meal is so expensive. The meal. I told Gabe, I was like, honey, every single person bought a meal. Every family that was represented at that class bought a meal or is in the process of getting the meal. I told them, I said, okay, so when this diabetes thing popped up, I did the blood work, that was $128. And then they did a CT scan of the pancreas or something to see if there was whatever. And that was $211. And we had already met the deductible because my son had to get stitches on Mother's Day. So that would have been, that's the price of your meal right there. And so I love what you say. You can either pay it on the end or you can pay it on the beginning.
The countless dollars that our family alone has saved in medical expenses is unbelievable. So what would you rather do? Buy bottles of pills in doctor's office, or buy equipment, make bread, eat delicious bread? This is food you can eat, enjoy. Yes. I'll never forget the lady. I share the wart story with the daughter that had over 500 warts, and her words just still resonate with me. When she came to the table and she said, "How much is a meal?" And when I told her, she said, "I paid more than that for one prescription drug that didn't work, and none of us could eat it and enjoy it." So,
yes.
You have to eat. I like to cook. What have I got to lose? And I know it's an investment, and I understand that, but it is an investment with lifelong return on your investment. You can't even count it, really.
And God is going to show up, if you don't have that money, or you don't, I have seen him, even when we first started, my husband, we were driving out, and he says, you think it was something else when we were looking at the bread maker. He says, you think God's just going to drop $1,100 into our account, into our lap? And I said, yeah, I think he is. And I was opening the mail as we were driving out of the neighborhood, and wouldn't you know, I looked at him and he said, what? And I said, he said, what? And I said, it's a check for $1,106. We had overage on the escrow account,
my God.
He is in the business of meeting needs, and this is a need, and this is important. And I don't know what was wrong with me, but I know I need all of those nutrients in the bread to fix it, and my children are healthy. You talk about the kids being, just thicker, my little Jediah, he is a sandbag. You pick up him and he is just, and they're just healthy, they just are healthy. And, my daughter went to college. My second daughter goes to Southeastern, about an hour away, and she's eating cafeteria food, and it has just wrecked their stomachs, both my older daughter and the second daughter. And so she comes home, she's on the worship team. So there's a family that drives her to service. And every week I give her a loaf of bread, and she takes it back, and eats it with the other. Maybe she can't have it all week, but she can, supplement to where she's not getting sick all the time.
Yeah. So how are you doing now? So how long has this been since you changed to going all in?
That was probably about 8 months ago. And
you're doing great? You haven't had any other...
So the only little episode when we were camping, I had brought muffins, and I just had a tiny little episode, one of those nights. But then, so I went and got the bread, and I had the bread maker. So the campground was about a half a mile down the road from our house. So I went home and I got the bread going, and they had been catering a lot and brought meals in and different things. And so I went and made the bread. And so the night we were all cleaning up, there were all these leftover ice creams, and I had an ice cream sandwich, and then they were like, oh, there's still more. And so against my better judgment, I had a second one, and I thought, I need to eat some bread with this so I will not get sick. And my friend Kayla, the gluten-free one, somebody had told her the wrong meatballs, that they were the gluten-free. And so she was starting to feel it like itchy on her skin. And I said, come with me and eat some bread. And I really see the value in there's death in the pot, and you can put the flour in that. And we went back and we both ate bread in the camper, and I didn't get sick that night and she had no reaction.
That's amazing.
It's just, and I try to look, changes just kind of happen and you don't realize it. But I remember Gabe had really bad allergies. He would get up every morning when we were married, blowing nose, doing things. And he doesn't do that anymore. And his blood pressure, he would go check it at Publix because it was getting high stuff. I was like, you haven't had any blood pressure. He's like, well, I've never really had blood pressure issues. And I was like, but I just don't think you realize what it is, like all the little things it's doing along the way. Yeah.
And I think, like you said in the beginning, we just think it's life, that it's normal, that this is me getting older. This is, everybody has allergies. Everybody has this, or that. And everybody's constipated. And doctors will even tell you that. It's just the way of things these days. There's nothing you can do about it. Yes, there is. And we need to take God's word for what it is. And wow, your testimony is just so amazing. I'm just so glad after all these years, you finding healing and finding the answers. And God always answers us. He always gives us wisdom when we ask and seek him for it. So I'm just so excited that you're sharing with the other people in your church, and you kind of already said what you're telling them, sharing your bread and sharing your story and going, I think you can eat this. I can eat this. That's just so exciting. So anything else you want to share, or any final words of encouragement as we wrap up that you would like to share with our listeners today?
I mean, if you were to write down what I do on a daily basis, it doesn't really fit in the paper. And one of the homeschool at conferences, she said, if it doesn't fit on paper, it won't fit in your day, when you're planning out your lessons for your kids. And it's worth it. It's worth the time. It's worth the money. Your family is worth it. Like it's not unattainable. Me running a congregation and running a farm and having my children and things, like, when it's important, you'll make the time and the investment for it. And isn't it, that's what he says in his word, you reap what you sow. So if I'm only going to do it halfway, then I'm only going to get halfway. But when we take him at his word and say, I know you want life for me and you want it abundantly and you will help me get it. And it's really hard when people tell me, oh, my son's gluten-free and they bring, and I'm like, no, this doesn't have to be your life. Like, I know what's in that garbage in that little plate right there. You don't want that. You don't want that. That is just going to lead to more problems. And I don't want people to go through what I went through. I want them to have that now. Yeah.
And I think the key is it's going all in. I can't tell you how many times over the years, people will write or talk to me and they'll say, I just haven't seen the health benefits that you share, that you saw with your family. And, when we started this, I'm an all or nothing. I went all in. I mean, white flour hasn't come in our home since 1991. Now, we may get it here and there, but I'm even still pretty careful. If I don't have bread with me, then I usually don't eat bread out. But I'm not saying I've never had a bite of white flour in 31 years, but but it's not been in our house. And the bread is pretty much the mainstay. But when I hear people say that, and then I say, gosh, are you eating the bread all day, every meal? And that's a big question. People say, well, how much bread do I need? And I always laugh. And I said, well, Jesus compared himself to bread. How much Jesus do you need?
Yes. Yes.
I know that sounds like a silly answer, but he compared himself to bread because bread is the mainstay of our life. When I say bread, I'm talking whole grain and beans. And most people groups around the world, they live on grains and beans, unlike Americans. But people would always tell me, well, I'm like, you're making the bread? And they're like, well, yeah, we make the bread. And I'm like, and you do pancakes and muffins? Well, we don't really like the pancakes with it, so I use white flour. We don't really like this with it, so I use white flour. And I'm like, you're not all in. So you're eating this that's taking your life, trying to put something in that's trying to give you life, and it's canceling each other out. You got to go all in to see the results. So it's just so exciting to hear that was exactly your journey, and it saddens me when I see people and myself included, unknowingly eating food that is taking our life and causing all sorts of health issues, and then praying to God for healing. And sometimes he answers by saying, here it is, the bread of life. So real bread made from freshly ground flour. I'm just so excited to hear your story. I know it's just going to bring so much encouragement to so many people. And you're finding what I'm finding. People that think they need to be gluten-free or grain-free or this free or that free, they can eat the bread and they have no adverse reactions. But what I'm finding is not only do they not have adverse reactions, they're finding healing.
And there's so many resources out there now, but you also have to be careful of that. Like it's social media, so they're gonna put like sometimes they'll put, and maybe it's real, but I look at those donut or roll or whatever, and I'm like, that is not fresh. But there are resources out there. The bread maker is not working. That wonderful video, I think it's 10 years old from Bread Beckers. My rise was too long, because I'm in Florida things, and calling the store. I say, call the store. They'll help you. Like you're not in this alone. There's a support group. And that's what's been great about our church is that everybody is encouraging one another. Like, yes, this is what's happening to me. And the testimonies just keep coming. Yeah. That the husbands are like, okay, let's go with it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Just revolutionizing your circle of friends and your body. And that's what's amazing. And, you said something that's very important, too, that I want to point out. The tools are an investment, and I get they're not cheap, but find what works for you. Find what will make it happen. Because a hand mill for you, I understand what your husband was saying, but with your children and pregnancies and your physical issues that were going on, some days it wasn't going to happen. And I'm like, I have a hand mill. I have a hand mill for backup if things, go south and we don't have power or whatever. But I wouldn't trade anything for my electric mill. And that's what I tell people. If you're looking for prepping only, then get a hand mill. But if you want to change the health of your family, get an electric mill and enjoy the electricity while it's here. So. Yeah.
Yes.
Or somewhat, you added the motor. And then for my family, a mixer was key. I homeschooled as well. So getting up and making 6 loaves of bread at a time, that got us to 2 or 3 days, and then I'd make it again. But some people, the bread machine is it. It makes it happen because it takes 5 minutes to load grain and, to mill your flour and put it in that bread machine and come back 3 hours later to a baked loaf of bread.
Yeah. Well, so I got that bread machine because I told Gabe, I said, I can, we're running around so much and I can program it and I can come home to fresh bread. Yeah. We can wake up, to have that mill going in the morning when I get up early and I'm doing Bible study, that wakes everybody up, right?
Yeah.
So
I know.
I either have to think about it the night before and mill it and put it in the freezer, or I have to, so I would start. So I'm like, if we can wake up to the fresh bread, then, we just start off smoother morning, And so I get the bread maker and I load it all up. And like I said, I'm not a detail person, that's more Gabe. And so I kind of read the directions and I programmed it. Well, so we're in bed and it is about 3 a.m. and you just hear and we live in the country. Like nobody knocks on the door. You have to get through 2 big dogs to get to us, and it was like, boom, 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 and I jump up and I'm waking him up and I'm like, somebody's here. And so we go out there. Well, it's the bread maker.
And it kicked on
at 3 a.m. because I said it wrong, it's just, but you wake up to that, cinnamon raisin bread. Like you can't beat waking up, having a fresh, good breakfast. They go out, do chores, come back. They're not hungry again until, 12:30,
Yeah, that was the other thing. And for those listening that may not be familiar with the Zoharushi bread machine, it has a time cycle. So you can set it so it's ready up to 13 hours ahead. And you can load it up and tell it to be ready at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning or 5 o'clock this afternoon, if that's better, or 6 when you come home from work. However works for you. And literally 5 to 10 minutes at the most to mill that flour, even clean up your measuring cups and things and just get everything in there. So that's a real plus. And some people find that, that's easier for them. I don't know what else I was going to say. I had another train of thought there, but I lost it. But anyway, it's just
probably about them not being hungry.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you. Thank you for knowing where I was going with that. that was the thing my family noticed the most. And when you have a lot of children and you're homeschooling and you're trying to get chores done and sit down and do school, people always say to me, oh, you must spend all your time in the kitchen and cooking. And I'm like, you know what? Actually, since the bread, no, we eat breakfast and no one's hungry until lunchtime. And sometimes late in the afternoon. And then they're going, are we going to have lunch?
Yes.
At 2 o'clock. And you're like, holy cow, if we have lunch now that includes bread, we won't be hungry till 9 o'clock.
Yes.
Because we were early risers and big breakfast eaters, but no snacking. And my children even commented one time, being around other families and kids and teenagers, they're like, they eat all the time. And we're like, they didn't snack. They didn't eat junky things. They didn't want junky things. It was amazing. You eat, you're satisfied. You're full, you've eaten well. So that was very exciting for me.
And our time in the kitchen, I know you had somebody on that was talking about homeschooling in the kitchen. I mean, my kids are just apart. Hannah's 9, and she does have like some dyslexia. And so I would have to watch because she would put tablespoon of salt instead of teaspoon of salt, and I'm like, no. But she has always just been right beside me baking. And now they do it on their own. She can make the bread. She can do even our little, we call her our fireball, is Eleonora. She's just turned 3, and I'll hit the button. I put it in, and I know that if I invest now in the time of those little ones while they're learning, come 6th, 7th, 8th, like they're doing it all on their own. They're serving.
And it's funny when they go out, just like you mentioned, your girls at college, they're noticing, hey, I don't feel as good as I felt when I was at home eating the bread all the time. And so they notice, and they're learning without you, the concepts of healthy eating without you having to pound it into them. And of course, then the exciting thing, the bread is delicious. But
yes.
I love Betsy's comment that y'all had the cookie contest at your and the top placers were all made with freshly milled flour. I thought that was so exciting and you mentioned it too, you don't have to compromise. And yes, ice cream here or there out, but at home you can make desserts and cookies and things like that with freshly milled flour, and they're just as good, if not better. I find that they have a flavor to them. They're not overly sweet. And no, I don't sit down and consume tons of them. In fact, you can't. You could sit down and eat a whole bag of store-bought cookies or whatever and want more. But when you make them yourself, you eat 1 or 2 and you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm satisfied. That was delicious. So in closing, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for sharing your story today. But I hope that it's an encouragement to everyone listening as the holiday season approaches, that we know that we can make all of our family favorites using freshly milled flour. You don't have to compromise. You can make it with freshly milled flour. I just came home from Greece, and there was a little orange tea biscuit cookie that I just loved while there. Well, yesterday I found a recipe and I tried it with freshly milled flour, and it is delicious. So delicious. So we can convert those less than healthy recipes using white flour to freshly milled flour. And we can know that we're giving our family much healthier options, and ones that they might even like better than the original, less healthy versions. That's what I found. So
yes, and that cookie contest, it's a gentleman that serves at a prison ministry, and it's Kairos Prison Ministry, and so they go in and provide food and things, but they provide these prisoners with fresh made cookies to show them that people took time and are praying for you and took the time to make you cookies. And so we turned it into, you bring 2 dozen for the prison, and then you'll share yours with the rest of the congregation, and we'll have a contest on who will do it. And the testimony of the prisoners was fascinating. But even Sue, when the people would walk through the line and I say, you can eat that cookie, you can eat that. Just their face. A dark chocolate espresso cookie, I can eat that.
Yes.
He's so amazing. God never ceases to.
Food freedom. We can have freedom, and God wants us to have freedom, and we shall know the truth, and the truth will set us free. And I just love that. Dawn, thank you so much for sharing your story with all of us today. And I just know people that are listening are going to be so encouraged.
Thank you so much, Sue. It was a blessing. Tuesday is our crazy day when you called, and I had snuck into the library to get the kids, and I answered the phone, and you said, Dawn, is Dawn available? I said, yeah. And then you're just like, this is Sue. I'm like, oh, I know who it is. And so I saw Betsy 30 minutes later at the drum lesson, and I said, so I got a phone call, and she was like, oh, is everything okay? And I said, from Sue Becker. And she goes, she does read her emails.
Yeah, I do. Every one of them. Sometimes it takes me a while to reply, but I do read them. So I just thank Betsy for writing, and thank you for taking the time out of your very busy day to share with all. And I just thank everyone for listening. And I just want to say, if you have a story that you would be willing to share, please email support@breadbeckers.com. They will forward it to me. And in closing, I just want to say this because it's coming up on Thanksgiving. As we gather around the table this Thanksgiving, may we all be truly grateful for God's perfect provisions of good food to nourish our bodies and give us the health that we are longing for. We can find that if we return to His ways of eating and living. And I just want to say to everyone listening, and Dawn and your family, may you be blessed as you celebrate a day of Thanksgiving. And until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.